Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're continuing looking into animation, and we're going to create a loading animation that I'm going to show you right now. So if I type into this box, you'll see we get this brief loader inside of the message box, and that's what we're going to be creating today. So I'm going to jump over to another tab here where I have an application running, and basically this is what we have, just a very basic skeleton for a chat. And we have two messages, one that's already been delivered, and then we have this message right here, which is currently displaying the loader. Now we're going to jump into the code just to see what it looks like. And we'll start in app.js, which is the entry point for the application. We have a chat component here, and if we jump into that one, you'll see that we have just a simple outer container, an inner container, and then we have the first message, and we have the second message, which is using the loader SVG that we are importing at the top here. And basically, this is just a Create React App syntax for importing a SVG as a React component that you can then use in your outer component or your application. So we have the loader SVG right here, and we can also jump and take a look at what that looks like before we get started with the animation. So this is the loader SVG. It's basically has three circles, which has specified these three properties, CX, CY, and the radius. And that just basically determines the position and the size of the circle. So the position on the x-axis, the position on the y-axis, and the size is determined by the radius. So what we now want to do is we want to take these circles and we want to animate them. So I'll start by giving each circle here an ID. So we're going to go and give it an ID, and we'll say loader circle, and then we need to say 1 and 2 and 3, because we want to have different identifiers for each of these circles, because each of these circles correspond to the first, second, and third circle in this loader. So we want to target each one and add a slightly different variation of the animation to each circle so that we can get that delayed effect. And you'll see that in a second. But for now, we're going to go back to the code. And now that we have the IDs for each circle, we'll go ahead and we will write the animation. We'll jump into the CSS file that I've scaffolded out here. And what we'll do is we'll create a keyframes called load. And if you saw the last video, you remember that this is basically the skeleton of the animation, and we're just using this to specify how the animation is going to look at certain points in time. So at 0%, we want the opacity here to be 0, and the opacity controls the visibility of the item. So at 0% opacity, it's invisible. And when the animation is at the 50% point, we want the opacity to be 1. So that means that we want the opacity to be 100% visible. And then we'll have it go back to 100%. So at the end of the animation, it's going to go back to being invisible again. So basically, it's going to go back and forth between these different states. So it will start at invisible, then it will become visible, and then it will go back to being invisible again. So with that, we are going to go ahead and start applying this. So what we'll do is we'll target the loader, and you can see that the loader has an ID here called loader, so we'll just use that to get some amount of specificity in our CSS. So we'll say loader and then loader circle 1. And inside of here, we are going to go ahead and put our animation. So we'll say that the animation is going to be the load animation. It's going to be 1 second long, and we want it to run forever. So it's going to have an infinite iteration count. And we haven't talked about this syntax yet, but this is basically just allowing us to define the different animation properties in one shorthand. So it's the same as doing animation name, load, animation duration 1 second, and animation iteration count infinite. So we're just doing it a little bit more concise here. So let's go back to the browser and see what this gives us. All right, so now we have this flashing single circle here. So that's what we wanted. Now we have to define the rest of these. So I'm going to go back to the code and I'll do another one. And this is going to be loader circle 2. And for this, we want to add a small delay. And let's do 0.25 seconds or 0.2. And then for loader circle 3, we'll add a delay of 0.4. So this means that the first animation will execute, and then it's going to wait 0.2 seconds before it starts the animation for the loader circle 2, and then 0.4 seconds until it starts the animation for loader circle 3. So that's going to give us this result. So basically you have like the different circles going in and out of different opacities at different points in time, which creates this rippling loading effect. Now let's say you didn't want to have the loader doing these opacity changes, but instead you wanted to have it move vertically up and down. Now that would be really easy for us to do, because if we go back to our code, we can see that the animation is actually being controlled by this load keyframe. And it's being applied to these different circles now. So whatever we do inside of the load keyframe, that's going to affect all of these different circles. So we could actually take the different property here. Let's say we want to do transform instead. And if we update this to be translate Y, and we change this at the 50% mark, let's say 15 or 12.5 pixels. And then we'll go back to 0 again at the 100% mark and save that. And we'll go ahead and check out the result. So now you have a different kind of loader where the circles are bouncing up and down. And it's really easy to do. You're just changing the values in the load animation and applying it. It's being automatically applied to these circles. So I think that's where we'll round up today. You've seen a couple of examples on how you can easily create these kinds of loaders just with an SVG and some simple CSS. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you in the next lesson.